Guys, how's it going? I've been receiving a number of emails lately on different things about Paraguay and opinions on certain things. One of them is farming in Paraguay, how it compares to Canada. I asked the viewer for some questions about that he would like answered since I have no personal experience in farming, but with the help of a local farmer that has moved here from Canada several years ago and started their own farm, I have been able to find answers to pretty much all the questions being asked. This farmer does not have experience in Canada directly, so this is just from the best of our knowledge, and I hope it helps. The first question is, what do they feed their cattle? They've seen corn being fed, but what about alfalfa? And the answer to this is yes, primarily corn made into silage because alfalfa does really not grow well here. This makes corn the most cost-effective way to feed cattle. In addition to that, most farmers around here, they have veterinarians coming in about twice a month, and they will take milk samples, test them, and depending on results of that, they can make suggestions on what else to feed in addition to this corn silage to improve the quality of the milk as well as the production. Question number 2 is it harder to deal with the heat in Paraguay than with the cold in Canada to keep the milk production up? I'm not sure I can answer this question with a definite yes or no because I personally don't know the effects of the cold in Canada, how it affects the production. But I would have to say it is somewhat difficult here to keep the production up in the heat of the summer. But a lot of farmers have figured out ways to limit the effects of this, and this is by using mattresses under a wide open roof and keeping their cattle in there, as well as having fans blowing and sprinkler systems running to keep cattle hydrated. Question number 3 is, how are the prices per liter determined? Is there a government set price or is it simply based on supply and demand? The price per liter is determined primarily based on supply and demand. Although factories will have base prices that they will pay, and that right now it's fluctuating around 3,000 guarani per liter. From there, it really depends on the quality of milk. For instance, if you have a higher fat level, then the price per liter is going to be higher because it's more beneficial and they get more use out of it. Question number 4 is, how much land is needed per cow? Now, this really varies depending on the quality of the land and also what approach you take to farming. What a lot of farmers do is they will have the fields that they need to be able to cut silage for their cattle, but then also to make the most use of the land and to not wear the land down too much, they will rotate this with soybeans. And then in turn, they can go and sell the soybean off on the market. And then the next season for the next harvest, they can go in and seed corn again, creating silage for their cattle. And this just kind of really helps supplement the income as well to make the most use of the land that you have and just to get the most benefit out of it. Another approach that some farmers use is they will take a large field, they will section it off into several different areas, and then they will rotate which section they feed on if they prefer to primarily grass feed. This allows for grass to regrow in certain areas while still using the other areas to graze. Although this does seem to have an effect on the quality and the milk production, it makes it a little bit lower, and just because the cattle is moving around more and also may not get quite the amount that they would if they were being fed inside. The one benefit there is to this approach is you can usually have a higher head per hectare ratio. This allows for about 5 to 10 cattle depending on the quality of land. Number 5 is, are there cattle auctions, or how is cattle usually bought and sold? And there's two ways to do this. There are quite a bit of auctions. Most of them are kept within the Mennonites. So the best way to go about this would be to have an agent among the Mennonites to get your hands on these cattle. And another way is sometimes you can come across a scenario where there's going to be one farmer that wants to sell his whole operation off, and it's much easier to just find someone that will buy the whole thing and get rid of it all at once. This is what the local farmer has done that I have gotten a lot of help on with these answers. The benefit to purchasing from a Mennonite auction is that they very often have higher quality purebred Holsteins. Question number 6 is, how are the regulations here compared to Canada when it comes to dairy farming? And The answer to this is I have multiple family members, more distant relatives that do dairy farming, and they're all surprised when they hear that Canada has a quota system that you have to buy into in order to even start dairy farming. They've never heard of any such thing here, and I also am not aware that any of them ever have to have agents come in and perform inspections and tests. However, the one area where you will have regulations is when it comes to grain farming close to a town. You cannot have land adjacent to a town and spray for herbicides and pesticides. This is completely prohibited by the Paraguayan government. Number 7 is, what is the average farm size in our area? Now, most of them that we have seen is between 60 and 80 cattle. That seems to be a comfortable spot for a lot of these farmers, unless you have a few that really want to go all out. Then there are some that will have 200 plus cattle, and taking this into account, that does bring up the average. But to make a comfortable living and be well off, a lot of them, they will stick with 60 to 80, and that's a good amount of work already for them. Now, last but not least, what are some of the pros and cons in farming in Paraguay over Canada? I would have to say there are a lot of pros to farming in Paraguay over Canada. For instance, when you need to hire a helping hand to run the farm, the cost of this is a lot lower because the wages are lower. Another pro is that there is only a 10% tax to any net profits that the farm generates. In Paraguay, you also avoid having to prepare for such extreme colds like you do in some areas of Canada. And this just makes it a lot easier. You don't have to ensure that there's going to be well enough feed to last you throughout a 6-7 month winter. The last pro that I have for today is there's not a quota system in Paraguay that limits you how much dairy you're allowed to sell within a certain time frame. The con to this, though, is that not having quota systems also does not set a more firm price per liter on your dairy. Another con that will be faced in Paraguay is the heat and making sure the production and the quality of the milk stays somewhat up to par as when you're not dealing with the heat. When you have the strain of the heat taking a toll on the cattle, you see a lower production and a lower quality in production. And this is something that we saw this summer. There was about 6 weeks of quite a bit of heat, going up to 40s and quite high humidity. This lowered the production by a third, and in turn, that raised the prices in the stores for dairy. That is all I have for this video. If you found it helpful or informative, then please do consider subscribing and liking the video, and I'll see you in the next one.